In day 2 of the Madlanga Commission, General Mkhwanazi dropped some bombshells. He was naming names, and I just hope that he has all the receipts to back them up, because those are some serious accusations that he threw around in front of the commission today. Now, today I'm going to be going over a lengthy recap. If you want the shorter version, I did post a TLDR. But in this case, we're going to be going through all of the shocking revelations that came out today. And trust me, there are many. No wonder General Mkhwanazi is drinking his own water and bringing his own water and switching chairs all the time. I would as well. Now, to start off, we're diving into the center of this whole issue, which is the KZN Political Killings Task Force. We know that this task team was established in order to protect the democracy of South Africa, and it was established, it works specifically in KZN, because we know a lot of political violence happens in KZN, especially around election times. And instead, we are learning about disembandment orders, missing dockets, political interference from MPs, and even cartel connections. So let's break down exactly what happened today. So just a quick recap. Yesterday, General Mkhwanazi testified that suspended Police Minister Senzo Mkhunu did not have the authority to disband the task team, and that he was influenced. Remember, he's influenced by someone in power. Now today, Mkhwanazi went further, revealing that critical dockets were removed from the tasking and sent to Pretoria. We had a little bit of that yesterday. Those 121 missing dockets. And we know that of the dockets that were transferred, only one family was told that the dockets had been transferred. The rest still thought that investigations were going on. Now, these dockets had, 5 of the dockets had instructions for arrests, and these arrests were never carried out. So think about that. Cases ready to move forward, but they just sat there. No arrests, no accountability. Now we're going to get on to the second part of what happened today, which is that Mkhwanazi reads a letter from the head of the MPA in KZN, Elaine Harrison. Now, Harrison wrote a letter and she was enraged because she says her office was not told about the disbandment of the Political Killings Task Force. That means that basically this decision looked rushed, chaotic, and without consultation. And even prosecutors in charge of the political killing cases had been blindsided. We know that she expressed concern because of the upcoming 2026 elections, fearing that violence could occur. She had dedicated courts, dedicated prosecutors at her bid, and they also had a correctional center that they were using to kind of isolate the people involved in these criminal cases, these political cases, to reduce interference. Now, General Mkhwanazi shifts to prosecutors' failures that occurred, that he also read from another letter. So, for example, we know that murder cases with strong evidence had their cases withdrawn, the charges withdrawn, and that hitmen were granted bail of 10,000 Rand. And additionally, one of the prosecutors in one of the cases, even though there was very strong evidence for that it was a serious unaliving, the prosecutor referred it for an inquest, which is basically, a formal proceeding to see if some murder was committed, or if murder was indeed committed, or was it foul play. And after this, he also brought up an intimidation case was dropped by a prosecutor because the words "you will feel the heat" were not deemed threatening. And these aren't small mistakes. These are decisions that literally allowed killers or alleged killers to walk free. And basically, when the Scorpions arrived, there was a prosecutor-driven model. We know that the prosecutors worked directly with the Scorpions to build the cases because they know what they needed to prosecute the cases and get these people behind bars. And this prosecutor-driven model once worked, but now we see the collapse of it, right? And then we get onto the names. General Mkhwanazi dropped MP names. Now, the names that were dropped are huge. So the first one is that Fadiel Adams from the National Coloured Congress, Mkhwanazi, and these are allegations. These are General Mkhwanazi's allegations against him. These people are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And at this stage, this is just, allegations. We haven't seen the proof. We haven't seen the receipts yet. But he accuses Adams of unauthorized access to classified intelligence and reckless use of it. We know that at one time it appeared that he might have been gunning for the political killings unit because he made a case saying allegedly that the killings unit was using the budget to buy cars, and he sent it off to the guy we all know about, Mr. Senzo Mkhunu, and said that there was interference happening in that case, even though there was no signs of it, allegedly.
Mr. Fadiel Adams and the DA MP, that is Dianne Kohler-Barnard. Of course, with Adams, he spoke about a non-complaint, that's how it's been described, that was laid with regards to funds being used towards the political killings task team. He states that the timeline in which Adams had made that complaint was so quick, in quick succession, that he argues that it was all an effort, an alleged collusion with the minister to frustrate the work of the political killings task team because it has zoomed in its investigations onto an alleged drug cartel. Would have represented Parliament in the oversight role of the police, and how one particular figure, that is Fadiel Adams, would have gotten information relating to crime intelligence. And instead of allegedly using that information towards the work of Parliament, uses it to advance a particular interest that you can see is trying to link towards this overall efforts to frustrate or ensure that the PKTT does not continue to advance its work in South Africa, particularly in two provinces. He highlights the Western Cape and Gauteng through the Orlando Police Station and the Cape Town Police Station. What did you draw from that information?
Kenya, good afternoon to you and your viewers, of course. It's day 2 and we still have about 40 more pages of that affidavit from Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi to go through. So, and of course, some of the matters being canvassed now are also going to feature again later on, as he has said. So, as you are saying, it's quite early days. But I think what is beginning to emerge, and of course, I must not fry the commission's chairperson, but he said, his question as to why would there be such laborious efforts on a non-complaint, because and that's because I'm starting to see a trend here, and where probably Mkhwanazi is going, which is to try and say the 2 complaints laid by Adams in Cape Town and then 2 days later in Orlando Police Station, probably one were not only of his own action, they were probably coordinated elsewhere. But I think the important part that he makes about Adams is that because he's not a member of the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence, he ought not to have received classified information to begin with. And once he had the classified information in his possession, he ought to have taken it to the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence in Parliament, because he says as a lawmaker he ought to have known what the National Intelligence Act says in terms of handling that information. So actually Mkhwanazi's first charge is that Adams, one, should not have had the information. Secondly, had he had it, he should have taken it to the right forum in Parliament. And thirdly, he probably abused the information that was at his disposal. And I think that's really the important charge here. And of course, when you talk about where the coordination comes from, I think he's charging that the Minister of Police's office and Adams may have been acting in cahoots.
Speaking on that, Adams allegedly gets this information. He's a lawmaker. He doesn't utilize the parliamentary process. He goes and opens those cases and then writes to the Minister of Police for his intervention. What do you make of the steps that he took instead of heading to Parliament, if he felt that there was a genuine concern with the work of the PKTT or how the funds were being used towards the advancements of the PKTT?
Look, Kenny, I'm not a fundamentalist about classified information as to, just because it's classified. I've always believed that if it's in the public interest, something ought to be done about any document that lands on your desk in the best interest of the public. We've fought the secrecy bill for over a decade now, particularly because of those issues, to say you must insert a public interest clause in any form of classification, because otherwise you will classify corruption. Now, the point, though, here is that you have to look at the timeline. You open a case, you go open another case, identical case, in another jurisdiction 2 days later, and then the next day you file a complaint that your investigation is being intercepted. I think that points to a potential malafide in the actions of the complainant. And of course, I mean, the complainant is now an implicated person by the commission. They will be granted the opportunity to probably present themselves before the commission.
All right, thank you very much. That was political analyst Lukhona Mnguni going through this.
Mr. Adams, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. Just give us a reaction with regards to that which the General has put out as an allegation of you having access to that information and handling it recklessly.
Yes, certain documentation was slipped under my office door. I had to read it 3 times, maybe 4 times, because it was unbelievable. I decided that yes, there might be a case for criminality here, so I took it to the nearest police station. Now, if General Mkhwanazi feels that you have something like top secret crime in this country, then he must step forward and say so. I certainly do not buy into that narrative. This country is tired of crime. It doesn't matter who's committing it. I don't care if it's a police general. I don't care if it's the president himself. This is where Mkhwanazi and I differ profusely. So, yes, I was in possession of evidence, of information. I took it to the police station, and if this man feels that I should be arrested for it, then let him go and lay the charge. Because South Africans should no longer have to carry the burden, the taxpayers' burden, for other people's skelmigheid. That is what it is. So here I stand today, accused by a 4-star general, a whole police commissioner, of being a possible criminal, if I'm understanding him right, if I'm listening to him right. But Mkhwanazi must make us understand why he's so desperate to have an issue of almost R1 billion worth of fraud of corruption reduced to an HR issue. Is it because he is friends with one of the accused?
So, Mr. Adams, I mean, you say this was slipped under your office door. Do you know who slipped it in? And also the General speaks of this information having been handed over to the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence. Why did you opt to take it to the police and not to the committee?
So when I received this information, I think I might have been an MP for 3 or 4 months. I haven't been in a workshop that says when you find information under your door that looks like it's criminal, this is the department you must take it to. You must also understand that this is South Africa, and in South Africa we have a culture of cover-up. Let me just refer you back to Pala Pala. How can this country not know where those millions of rands or $500,000 came from? How don't we have the right to know? Because a handful of lawmakers decided that possible corruption must be covered up. I will not be a part of a system like that. And if it costs me my parliamentary badge, then Ramaphosa must come and take it.
So in hindsight, would you still have taken it to the police as opposed to the committee, knowing what you know now?
I would 100% take it to the police. And furthermore, Mkhwanazi is on about me writing an email to the minister at 20 minutes past 8 in the morning. It might shock him. I start working at 6:30 at Parliament. He can come and check the cameras here. The other thing is that when my docket was allegedly collected here by the provincial office, he has an issue with that as well. Why does he not have an issue with me having laid a charge 1 year ago at the provincial find an investigator? Is Mkhwanazi asking for this case to be covered up because a friend of his is implicated? Why is the general from KZN so concerned about fraud that happened in Pretoria? It's not even in his jurisdiction.
So, I mean, Mr. Adams, the commissioner spoke about the possibility of whether or not yourself, together with the DAMP, would be called to the commission. Have you been requested to appear before the commission?
I hope I'm called to appear before this commission. I really hope I am. Because today, a 4-star general was throwing out innuendos left, right, and center. If he's not brave enough to say what he feels or what he believes, let me assure you I am. There's 400 members of parliament up in here, right? 399 of them may be scared of Mkhwanazi. You tell him Fadiel Adams isn't.
All right, Mr. Adams, I mean, certainly, I mean, if we go back to the issue of whether or not you would have still taken the information to the police as opposed to that, to the committee rather, I mean, given the sensitivity of that information, you still stand by the fact that this information would be taken to the police as opposed to the structures that would have needed to deal with the processes?
My lady, let me ask again, are we so comfortable with crime in this country that I would be asked to be part of a cover-up if my eyes saw it? I've got children dying on these Cape Flats because we don't have photocopiers. No. here. Tonight, 7 of our sons will die, but people are being allowed to steal hundreds of millions of rands, and I'm being asked to make sure that this remains top secret. I will not. I repeat to you, I will not. I will face whatever comes. I will not be a part of this.
All right, that's Fadiel Adams speaking.
And in the second MP that was named was Dianne Kohler-Barnard from the DA. And Kohler-Barnard is accused of fueling malicious attacks against the crime intelligence, as well as perhaps fueling these attacks in order to allegedly aid a cartel in Gauteng.
If you look at Barnard as well, he goes on to state that she too allegedly, in her efforts, attempted to frustrate the work of the Political Killings Task Team, specifically mentioning General Khumalo of Crime Intelligence, and fingers her as part of those overall efforts to stop that investigative lens on that alleged drug cartel.
These allegations, Dianne Kohler-Barnard joins me now to respond to this. Dianne, thank you so much for your time this evening. You've been criticised by the KZN Police Commissioner for essentially disclosing classified information, telling the South African public that perhaps as a seasoned member of parliament, you could have known better. Your response to this?
Well, the statement, I must categorically say, and in the strongest possible terms, is outrageous, it's defamatory, and it's entirely baseless. I have no idea why he's felt the need to make this statement. He's even suggested my involvement in a criminal syndicate and that I've leaked sensitive information. Now, I was on the JSCI, the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence, last term, the full term, no issues. And then it was obviously dissolved at the end of the last parliament. On the 17th of February this year, there was extensive reporting. There were photographs in national newspapers about the properties. And I wrote to the Inspector General of Intelligence as an ordinary MP, formally requesting an investigation into what seemed to be dubious purchases of the 2 properties by Crime Intelligence. That was out in the public domain, and the request was a direct response to the serious concerns raised. My inquiries to the Minister of Public Works, for example, confirmed that no approach had been made for the properties. There are many public works properties that are utilized, and that's basically a fundamental legal requirement for such acquisitions. Now, the various reports in the newspapers suggested the purchases were approved internally by high-ranking SAPS crime intelligence members, bypassing proper procedure, and that raised significant red flags. Bear in mind that the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence took a full year from the time of the national election to operationalize. So it was months before the committee was formally constituted that I wrote to the Inspector General of Intelligence, 2.5 months. Now, I served as a member during the last term, and I know once you are sworn into the committee, no member may share anything spoken of within that committee. When we were sworn into the committee, that then was the rule, and I had not been sworn into any committee. As such, obviously, I cannot today speak of the outcome of the investigation by the Inspector General of Intelligence because the report was presented to the committee. Now, for it to be suggested, as some headlines read today, that I was somehow part of a criminal syndicate is absurd. I've spent 21 years in Parliament passing laws and ensuring that they go through Parliament and they are implemented. To make such a claim is outrageous. The Lieutenant told the Judicial Commission that they could Google my statement, but in the same light, a few minutes of research on Google would have shown him that the initial reports of the 2 properties appeared in the media where they appeared, and that I then subsequently reacted to those reports and said that I had approached the Inspector General.
Now, Mkhwanazi,
I was only 2 months later, so really what he's come out with is outrageous.
I understand that from Mkhwanazi's side, he argues that that very statement, by going public with it, you may have forced intelligence officials in some way to defend themselves and risk exposing more state secrets. Do you accept perhaps maybe that they may have been, apart from your side, despite the fact that it was perhaps public, but issuing the statement may have undermined their efforts as well?
Absolutely not. This was out in the public domain. Every inch of it was in the public domain. The questions were being asked everywhere. I simply asked for an investigation to be done. So I didn't predetermine the matter. I didn't predetermine the outcome. I asked the correct person as an ordinary MP, not a member of the JSCI, which did not exist at that stage, to do the investigation. So for him to suggest that somehow I was forcing somebody to do something, no. I asked the Inspector General to investigate. That is what I did. I find this attack on me quite bizarre in the extreme. And because he's incorrect in his claim that I was a member of the JSCI.
And I'll just have to ask, there is another MP that's also been accused this afternoon in regards to that, and that's Fadiel Adams, also implicated in that. Between the two of you, I would say, is your matter perhaps different from his, given the fact that he, of course, should have not had any access whatsoever to any type of intelligence information?
It's totally different. He has claimed that he had in his hands classified information. I mean, that, as far as I know, is a criminal offense right away. So it has to be determined how he came upon it. And I think he's been very clear on what he did with it. That's not something I've ever done or ever would do. And nor would I ever walk out of the JSCI. One can't take classified information out of those offices. It's an impossibility. So what he's been up to is none of my business, but it's very bizarre indeed. And to be linked with that is quite insulting.
Democratic Alliance MP Dianne Kohler-Barnard there speaking to us about those allegations coming from Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, speaking, of course, about MPs that may have interfered with some of the state work. Thank you so much for your time.
Now, Justice Madlanga interrupted, and both MPs are going to be given notices and they won't be prejudiced in these proceedings. So we're probably going to hear from them as well. But like I said, these are all his accusations and they are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now, to name sitting MPs is huge. But another thing, it just shows you that if these accusations are true, it shows us how deeply the rot might go. I mean, politicians handling secret intelligence files that they're not supposed to, have. People gunning for the very units that are set up to prevent political killings. And then we get to the cartel connection. Enter Brown Mogotsi and Kat Matlala. We can't stop talking about Kat. I was speaking about him yesterday and how his bail was denied, but Kat allegedly had blue lights. But yeah, police officers allegedly registered Matlala's cars as if they belonged to a municipality, and Kat could go around with his little blue lights. What?
The Mr. Matlala, Kat Matlala, Vusi Kat Matlala, is one fellow that has been enjoying too much privilege from the law enforcement. And the typical example is that one of, or at least few of his vehicles, not talking about the number, but it's a couple of them, 4 or 5, the number will be confirmed through the report. His personal vehicles were registered by the Deputy Chief of Police at Ekurhuleni, that is Major General Mkhwanazi. He facilitated the registration of these Mr. Matlala's vehicles under the municipality as if they are municipality official vehicles, utilizing the funds from the municipality of Ekurhuleni. So the vehicles then belong on record, when you test them on the system, they reflect as if they belong to municipality. It did not end there, commissioners. He took these vehicles and he caused the municipality to take the blue lights that belongs to municipality. The blue lights are supposed to be for the law enforcement vehicles within municipality. And he fitted those blue lights in these vehicles. And these vehicles were then given to Mr. Kat Matlala. I must indicate, in terms of the Traffic Act, the only authorized bodies to be able to drive with blue light on the street are law enforcement, which would include SAPS, the Metro Police, Traffic Police, as well as the military police of the defense. They are the only one authorized by law to make use of these blue lights. And even the utilization of the blue light is somehow regulated, that you cannot just willy-nilly use a blue light. So it's an emergency light, it's a warning light. But this was not only done by Matlala privately to the service provider, but it was done by law enforcement of Ekurhuleni. And to confirm this, there is a report that is available, because this complaint comes from the chief of this municipality. When he registered the complaint against this, told, according to his words, he was suspended because the principal at municipality did not want him to pursue this investigation against his junior. So he provided this information, and he brought this to the attention of his executive in municipality, city manager. It will appear that not much was done to the person that was responsible for this, despite the fact that the law was broken.
Vehicles that was done personally, allegedly, by a deputy chief police officer in Ekurhuleni. He states that that was too much privilege for an ordinary member, and that legislation guides who can drive around with blue lights, and that is something that is afforded only to those law enforcement agencies and not ordinary citizens of South Africa. Now, when you zoomed in further on this role that law enforcement agencies play in getting these organized crime syndicates to thrive, he refers to a JMPD officer. Again, the name of Katiso Molefe is mentioned. That is another individual that is currently also facing very serious charges and has been alleged to have close links with a drug cartel. Now, or a cartel member, if we could put it that way, on our team. So he states that this JMPD officer would do favors, allegedly, for Molefe, and would go to his home, for example, if there was a car that seemed to be suspicious outside his house. We're told through the evidence of Mkhwanazi that this particular JMPD officer went to the home of Molefe, used police resources to screen the registration number of the vehicle that was seen outside the home of Molefe, was able to identify that it was a police officer, gave him that information, and then dropped him off back at home. He states
about that. Now, we're talking about Brown Mogotsi. We know he's a businessman from Mafeking, and he is connected to Senzo Mkhunu. He is accused of being the go-between between Cat and Senzo Mkhunu, and he is linked also to Vusi the Cat Matlala. And the allegations are that police registered Matlala's vehicles, and obviously had the blue lights, and the vehicles effectively state-sponsored hitman cars. So those very cars with the blue lights were allegedly used to unalive people that Cat didn't like. Now, Mkhwanazi even suggests that the criminal cartels infiltrated law enforcement itself, and this is state capture. If these allegations are true, this is state capture, gangster style. Not just politicians, but hitmen getting protection from inside the system. Now,
he then moved to the executive. He then goes to Brown Mogotsi. That is a name that we have seen mentioned often since that infamous press briefing where Mkhwanazi first made these allegations public, and that sent shockwaves through the nation and, of course, triggered this commission that we are at today. He discussed that Mogotsi is an alleged associate of Senzo Mkhunu who had contacted him by WhatsApp. That's the first time that he had received communication from this particular individual. And he states before the commission that he got the sense that this person is someone who is close to the minister, and at the time when he received the text, he believed that the person was actually with the minister when they sent it. He stopped that testimony because he realized during the testimony that there were parts of the WhatsApp messages that he actually hadn't provided in full. Now that information had to be parked, or that evidence rather had to be parked until a later stage where they can get all the messages and then he can present it properly to the commission.
Mkhwanazi says that the criminal justice system is being undermined by interference from both MPs and executive figures. He questions how involved are politicians, private people, and even police officers in interrupting justice. And that is what the heart of this commission is about. It's not about just one task team. It's about whether South Africa's democracy is safe heading into next year's elections. Now, MK Party during the day tried to stop the commission. They obviously lost in courts. The proceedings must proceed for the sake of justice. And at one point, the evidence leader, Selo, called Mkhwanazi Mr. Mogotsi by mistake, and there was a rare moment of levity in these tense hearings. And even in these heavy hearings, you can see just how surreal the whole saga is, And basically, Mkhwanazi closed with the two bombshells that Matlala knew about the Hawks appointment, the director of the Hawks appointment, before they were announced. That's Mr. Shadrack Sabir. And there was also a suggestion of malicious structure inside IDAC, that is that body for corruption in South Africa, that corruption watchdog, saying that there is a good side and there is a bad side. And if these accusations are true, this means that this is Gupta-style state capture 2.0. Criminals knowing top appointments before the public, before the post had even been circulated. That's not just corruption. That is infiltration at the highest levels. And the Madlanga Commission is only on day 2. And we're already hearing these allegations that are going to shake the foundations of law enforcement and possibly our democracy. With elections around the corner, can the stakes be even higher?